thank you for coming today. Today we have Grace Smyth with us, who is going to talk about perfectionism, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm just going to let you kick off, really. I think it's such an issue in the legal profession. I speak to lots of people who would describe themselves as a perfectionist, and it definitely comes with good and bad sides to it. So yes, Grace, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. I'm just going to share my screen and get my PowerPoint up. So can you see that?
Yes, that's all clear.
Brilliant. Okay, so this is what we're going to be looking at today. The dark side of perfectionism, really, because like you mentioned, it kind of has like a good reputation, perfectionism. And I saw you put on one of the marketing posts for this webinar about how it's like the weakness that we all give in an interview.
I think it's the classic, isn't it? It's
The
the classic.
classic.
Oh no, I'm a
Yeah.
bit of a perfectionist. Like
Yeah.
it's a
Like,
humble brag, they say, don't they? You know, it's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah.
Complete like token weakness. Um, but actually it does have quite serious mental health roots and symptoms. So we're going to look at what is maladaptive perfectionism first. I will use that term interchangeably with clinical perfectionism, and this is like the bad side, right? So not a good trait to have necessarily, but more of a coping mechanism. Then we'll look at symptoms and root causes. We'll look at the vicious cycle. That means the more you achieve, the worse you feel sometimes. I will link it to the nervous system and look at practical steps on how to deal with this, and then talk just very briefly a little bit about me at the end.
Excellent.
So this is the definition of maladaptive or clinical perfectionism. I should say, when I say clinical, this isn't a diagnosis, and the World Health Organization has got its manual, which diagnoses things like anxiety and depression, but perfectionism isn't going to be in there. But lots of practitioners will talk about clinical perfectionism. And what it really means is it's a coping mechanism. So clinical perfectionism is setting and striving for very demanding standards in an attempt to control oneself and one's environment to gain approval or feel safe. First thing to note is that this definition isn't being perfect. Being perfect isn't perfectionism, largely because we won't ever really achieve perfection. So it is important to note that it's the striving that matters. It's aiming for that level that matters. This is also different to healthy goal setting, because as you can see, it's it's in an attempt to be controlling of oneself, and it's to gain approval, and it's to feel safe. It's not coming from a place of just wishing to improve and, take the next step in your career, for example. I would say lots of perfectionists, and I do count myself as like an ex-perfectionist. It's possible to be so full of the ways that you're not good enough that you don't actually see yourself as a perfectionist, because you're very conscious of the ways that you're not perfect. You're not managing to do everything at 100% of the time. So people who really do have this sort of clinical perfectionism actually might not at first glance recognize themselves in this definition. And that's where it's just really important to remember that it is about the striving for those standards. So I've put this slide and the next slide are quite wordy, because I've put all the kind of symptoms down on here, so that people, when they watch the recording, can go back and kind of maybe tally up which of these affect them. So as I said, anxiety and depression, these are genuine diagnoses, and they are very closely linked to perfectionism. But some of the other things that we'll see are putting too much pressure on oneself, self-doubt, poor self-trust, overthinking things, so replaying conversations that you've had throughout the day, being very self-critical in your internal dialogue, being overly focused on the details. So this is a tricky one because as lawyers, obviously attention to detail is so key and such a part of the job, but it is the relationship that you have to details. So if you are really worried about missing something, you know, anything when you're drafting any email, like let's say it's an email to a colleague, so far less important than a binding document, you might still be so focused on the details and so worried about missing something, and that's a sign of perfectionism. You may feel constantly overwhelmed and tired, also impatient and frustrated with other people. And this is because we project out our own expectations onto others. So if we are operating at a very high level, I'm not going to say perfectly because we won't be, but you know, really high achieving, we can expect everybody else to also be aiming for that standard, if not at that standard, and get frustrated when they're not.
Yep. I can think of situations in the workplace as well where that's you know, as a boss or a manager or someone like that as well. I think everyone can picture someone like that who is impatient and frustrated because the standards are so high, and you
Yeah,
know that they holding everyone to these very, very, very high standards, and it's frustrating everybody in the team. You know, I think that's a classic in law as well.
yeah, absolutely. And you can feel like people around you aren't helping or aren't pulling their weight, and they probably are, and they're probably doing a decent job, but you have these really high standards, like you said.
Mm.
And it's really, I think it's important to say that it can be really bad for your mental health, perfectionism. I mean, as shown by this lengthy list of symptoms. Um, Muscle tension is one, interestingly. I'll touch on that when I come back to the nervous system. Um, this one is a big one. So when a perfectionist feels out of control or has made a mistake, they will kind of double down and add extra pressure or an even higher standard. So whereas if I just go back to the previous slide, it links into this being very self-critical. So if you make a mistake, as opposed to being kind of kind to yourself about that and moving on, a perfectionist would tend to, like I say, double down, add an even higher standard or pressure onto themselves. Same if they feel at
Mm.
all disempowered or out of control, because ultimately, as we saw in the first slide, this is a coping mechanism to feel in control. Trying to control people's perceptions is a symptom. And now this in a law firm can be, you know, I think we probably all know somebody who thinks they have to come across as professional all the time, quite corporate all the time, not just with clients, but with their own colleagues, and perhaps hides themselves in work a little bit, not in a malicious way, but kind of puts on a bit of a front and is sort of on, you know, the whole time at work. And that can be a control mechanism. Perfectionists have this idea that sacrifice now earns something later. So it can be something big, like when I have my next promotion, then I'll be happy. Or when I've got that pay rise, then I'll be happy. When I've got a new job, I'll be happy. But it can also be things like I once I've finished everything, then I can go home and relax. Or once I have absolutely done this witness statement, then I'll have lunch or coffee or whatever. And it's not coming from a place of just, okay, well, I'll do half an hour's work and then I'll go and get coffee. It's more, I am hungry, but I am going to sit here until I have done this and triple checked it and
Mm.
completely finish it before I go and get lunch, before I take a break. And it does kind of tie in with the idea of I will feel better if I get everything done now, for example, and I will then deserve to relax. All or
Mm.
nothing thinking, I'm going to come back to in a second, but you will definitely see that with perfectionism. And also, interestingly, expectations on everything in life, including down regulating your nervous system, in other words, relaxing. So I've thought about the example of meditating. If a perfectionist kind of realized, okay, meditating would be a good thing to do, calm me down, the perfectionist approach would be to research all the apps that are out there, sign up for courses with like 3 of them, decide they're going to do it every morning and every evening, and beat themselves up a bit if they don't, if they miss one.
Yeah.
And that's quite, so it becomes a cure, right? It becomes like even relaxing is something that's on the to-do list.
Yeah.
It's for perfectionists, well-being burnout is really interesting. So this idea that you can burn out on wellness, because there's so much out there, and it is slightly to do with this idea of like striving to be a better person. So if you have perfectionist tendencies, you might really buy into that and burn yourself out. And there's that sad note I put there that it does kind of lead to a lack of playfulness, joy, and fun, right? Because you're seeing everything as just something you have to do. Okay, so this is where all or nothing thinking comes in. And I'll just talk through this pattern. This image and this cycle comes from Dr. Keith Gaynor, who does a lot of work on perfectionism, which is on YouTube for anybody who's interested. I don't think the starting point is low self-esteem, in that I don't think we just randomly start with low self-esteem, but I'll come back to that. But let's just take it as it is. So low self-esteem leads to you putting these very high expectations and rigid standards on yourself, so that when you go into a task, you then have 3 outcomes. Let's say this task is hitting your annual target of hours or fees, right? So
Mhm.
you go into the year, you go into this target, 3 things could happen. Firstly, you actually do meet that standard. I've put temporarily because you're not always going to meet all of these standards, but let's say you do meet this one, right? And you do hit your target. Do you celebrate that, or do you just assume it's nothing to get excited about and let's just move on? Next year's target will be higher again. Do you kind of dismiss it? Do you pause to in any way compliment yourself on hitting your target or not? If not, you are immediately undermining your achievement. And let's say it's something other than target as well. Any goal, let's say you hit your goal. Quite often perfectionists would think, oh yeah, but it's anyone could do that, or I actually could have done that quicker. I could have done it better. So you straight away undermine the fact that you have actually just hit your target in this case. The second option is that you don't hit your target. And in this case, you go straight on to self-criticism. I should say undermining your own achievement and not celebrating leads to self-criticism. And the third option is that you start to avoid work. So you've been overwhelmed for so long by your own kind of the enormity of your own expectations that you start to avoid, and even simple tasks feel like mountains to climb. So this obviously has an impact on work. This is where you start procrastinating, delegating a lot. Someone asks you to take something on and all you feel is sort of pressure. This is where you start to avoid, and this is the all or nothing thinking. So a lot of perfectionists, you'll see on here, there's not really anywhere for somebody to think, actually, 70% of my effort here is good enough. It's very much you meet those standards or you don't. You kind of start to avoid.
It's such a closed system as well, isn't it? When you see it like
Yeah,
that, it's sort of like, oh, yeah, you just get to the same point and then it goes round again. It's, yeah, a
exactly.
loop, a cycle that you're stuck in. Certainly is, yeah.
Exactly. And so it all comes back to self-criticism and low self-esteem. And then what so this is the reason why sometimes with a lot of people, you'll see the harder they work and the more they achieve, the worse they feel. So you can have people who have
Mm.
been in law for decades, um, with this cycle in their own head. And so actually, while their career from the outside is looking fantastic, they're feeling almost kind of worse and worse, more and more disenchanted, maybe,
Mm.
because you're programming this into your mind.
Yeah, I think I definitely see the like you said with the not recognizing the achievements. You get the promotion, and that was what you wanted, but then you think, yeah, but probably anyone that worked 10
Yeah,
years, 15 years, probably anyone would have been promoted anyway. So actually, eh, it's not that big a deal anyway. But anyway, whatever. Yeah, now I've been
yeah,
promoted. So it's sort of like instantly devaluing something that and then if you think, hold on, how many years ago that was the be all and end all in my mind, but now suddenly it's just, oh, I'm fairly sure that anyone would have got here, anyone would have done the same. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
exactly.
mm.
Because ultimately, however many billion people there are on the planet, we're not going to do anything unique, really.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's going to be quite tough going to find something that no one else could have done. So we move straight on to the next goal because again, there's always as well going to be somebody doing more, doing better, or earning
Mm,
more.
mm,
So
mm,
yeah, it's that mindset of, do you know, and it is a survival mechanism ultimately, because our brains do focus more on the negative than the positive,
mm.
because that is what keeps us alive, ultimately. And I think, our nervous system hasn't evolved for 40,000 years. So we're
Mm,
looking at
mm.
the negatives all the time and glossing over the positives. Um, and that's everyone to some extent, but particularly anybody who can relate to the perfectionism side.
No, makes sense.
So this is the link to the nervous system. So since I launched my business 3 months ago, I've since done another certificate just on the nervous system because this is something I'm really getting into and loving. Um, and I'm just going to touch very briefly on it here. So essentially, this middle section is where we're feeling nice and calm and regulated, and everything's okay. Things are happening, but we're feeling okay and we can deal with it all. This is the state where we actually connect best with people. So we can smile more widely when our nervous system is in this state. It's called ventral vagal. The muscles in our face actually allow us to smile more. The muscles in our inner ear change so we can listen to voices better, because it's all about connection with people,
Mm,
right? If something happens that we then really react to, so this trigger here, for example, we go up into sympathetic nervous system mode, which is fight flight,
mm-hmm.
characterized by the volcano, and this is hyperarousal. So you might relate to feeling angry and frustrated there, but also just kind of anxious, right? Like there's a lot of stimulation going on. Your nervous system can't really cope with it, it's trying. And this is where we get the muscle tension that I mentioned. So the muscles in our neck and shoulders brace, literally like you're going to fight, and your shoulders
Brace for
round.
impact.
Yeah, yeah, brace for impact. Shoulders round to protect your internal organs. Um, so, if you're having like some issues with posture, this can be related. And then what happens if you literally hit that point of overwhelm and you can't sustain that anymore? You don't go back to normal. You crash down here to hypoarousal. This is the human equivalent of play dead, with animals. So animals can sometimes literally sort of pause their pulse and their heartbeat for a while. Humans don't do that, but we have this, it's called dorsal vagal shutdown, which is like this very, very strong freeze response. Um, Kind of like a bit of a collapse, but just burnout and feeling very lethargic. I heard somebody talk the other day about the 9 to 5 being your job, and then the 5 to 9 in the evening being crucially important as well. And a lot of people will spend that 5 to 9 just sat on the sofa watching TV, unable to really get up and move and see friends and do anything. Sometimes, like in this diagram, the thing that gets people out of that is eating comfort food. Um, Not always, I will say, but that's quite often the pattern.
Mm,
And this is like so we've talked about the day-to-day symptoms perfectionists may feel, and this is more one of the big picture type patterns you might see, that this is something you feel quite a lot. This going into sympathetic, wake up feeling fine, go into sympathetic mode throughout the day, which is this real irritability and anxiety, and then crashing in the evening and spending this 5 to 9 just on social media or with a glass of wine.
mm, mm,
Okay, so just a note on connection as well. So still going through like the negative stuff here before we move on to like root causes and what can be done. Um, if you consistently strive to be the best, it can make others uncomfortable. Striving for more while downplaying your efforts elicits a comparison reaction in others. So let's say you get promoted to associate and you downplay it, you kind of make it look like it was easy, you weren't really trying. That really can make other people feel bad about themselves. We are, to a certain degree, all of us, always comparing ourselves to others a little bit to see how we're doing. And if you are getting promoted and also pretending it was no effort, it's not coming from a bad place, it's being modest, but it can really actually be a barrier to connection with others. Okay, so root causes. What I spend a lot of my time looking at with clients is root causes as opposed to just symptoms and then how we cope with those symptoms. So where does perfectionism come from? It can come from a workplace where you were made to feel like you had to be perfect in order to keep your job. This is a tricky one because there is huge pressure on lawyers to not make mistakes. And that is part of the job.
yeah, it could be a description of a legal workplace,
Yeah,
couldn't it? In lots of
yeah,
ways. Tricky.
absolutely. And I think it's so important for lawyers to be aware of this because it's almost like the environment that absolutely is trying to breed some kind of perfectionism.
Mm, mm,
Um, whether it's always having to show up in a certain way or never miss a detail or capture all your time in your time recording. Where does that kind of allow for you to just take a break, look away from your screen, do nothing? Um, it will come from any workplace where you had a narcissistic boss, which I do have experience of. It will come from any school environment where you were very pressured into good grades. So this is the idea that you are rewarded for what you achieved versus who you were. So the gold stars for achievement, not effort. Interestingly, there's a study done that shows attending a high achieving school is a risk factor for anxiety and depression. And it's funny when it's not funny, but when you read the list, the other things are things like child poverty, and then there's attending a high achieving school. And perfectionism, it goes without saying, really, it is very common in high achievers.
mm,
The fourth point is any incident, really, or series of incidents that have left you with a fear of uncertainty and not being in control can program in perfectionism into you as a coping mechanism. I kind of want to explain this slide a bit more because what's happening here is all four of these examples are all about programming your subconscious mind. So your subconscious and your unconscious mind together, which is even deeper, they drive about 95 to 97% of your feelings, thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. And we acquire subconscious programs, which are also called neural pathways, through the things that we are repeatedly exposed to and our emotions, because our brains work by making associations. So any environment we've been in, just to kind of simplify it, any environment we're repeatedly exposed to will program our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind drives our behaviors. So if we're in an environment like one of these, for example, it can literally program perfectionism into us as a coping mechanism.
mm.
we ultimately tend to treat ourselves very similarly to the way our environment treated us. So if we have a boss who is very critical over time, we will ultimately start to speak to ourselves in the same way. So that's why we need to be careful of our environment, because yeah, we can get programmed to behave a certain way, and it all comes back to the subconscious mind.
It's a bit self-perpetuating as well, isn't it? Because if the, like we say, the legal environment draws people in that are focused on the details, and then you're encouraged not to miss the details, and the environment also encourages you to do that, and your boss and all that, it's sort of it's building itself, isn't it, and
Yeah,
perpetuating itself. So it's almost what came first, the perfectionism in the profession, or
yeah,
the other way around kind of thing. It's yeah.
that's it. I think because once you get enough people who are of this mindset, then you can get kind of a whole culture of a firm that is
Yeah,
built
yeah.
around this.
That's the thing,
Yeah,
isn't it? It's easily done, I
um,
can see.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so subconscious beliefs. So some of these beliefs, or if you want to call them programs or the neural pathways, the associations will be as follows. So being perfect will get my needs met for control and safety. Control equals happiness or relief. People are watching my every move and evaluating me. People in my life expect me to be perfect. Now, these are not things you're going to be going around saying to yourself the whole time necessarily. You might be saying a version of these things, but you'll see them in your behaviors. For example, if you are in an open plan office, do you feel like you can't take a break because your boss might see what's on your screen and then think that you've been doing no work all day as opposed to taking a 10-minute break? Do you think you're allowed to look unproductive like that for 10 minutes? There are others as well. Like, these are just some examples I think people relate to. Um, the deepest beliefs that we have are limiting beliefs. So these are the things that our minds ultimately jump to at the deepest level. These are like about ourselves. So I'm not good enough, or I am unsafe. I've just noticed there's a rogue apostrophe in I am unsafe, but so I practice what I preach. I'm not perfect. um, so and I've put, so I'm not good enough, or it could also be I'm not smart enough, I'm not quick enough, I'm not professional enough. Um, these are things really about us at the core, and we reproject these out onto each day. So we can spend our day, if you think you're not good enough, you might spend your day judging yourself or thinking of ways to improve yourself, how you can be better. So if you take kind of a symptom like that and trace it all the way back, you might ultimately get to a very deeply held subconscious belief that's running your life, really, that's, something huge, like I am unsafe. Um, if you so remember that cycle from Keith Gaynor, the lower and lower self-esteem we mentioned as well. This is, and you said about how it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. It
Mm-hmm.
literally is, because you're hardwiring these beliefs into yourself further and further, because as we mentioned, the subconscious belief needs repetition. So if you keep living life as a perfectionist, you will get that lower and lower self-esteem because you are strengthening this belief. Um, Neural pathways in the brain, if they go between our nerve cells in the brain called neurons, and if they're not used, that association, that pathway just dies off. But if they are used and used all the time, they get stronger and stronger and stronger. So reprogramming these is the single best thing you can do to overcome perfectionism. It takes a minimum of 21 days to get a neural pathway that is strong enough to last, which is why it takes 21 days to build a new habit. It's the same thing. And doing this with clients, it probably would take about, this is probably a third or a quarter of the work I would do with clients. It's quite a big pillar. Using neuroplasticity, so this idea that we can reprogram our brains, to get rid of these beliefs and program in new ones. And when I say these, like, these are just some examples. There's about 20 limiting beliefs. So it be finding exactly what is affecting each client and reprogramming. If you do not have the ability to do that at the moment, what I've done is put 2 slides here again with quite a lot of words in here, because these are things that you can do for free at home yourself to reprogram and overcome perfectionism. I have said this is like healing beyond reprogramming, but why these things are ultimately working is they are really going to reprogram you. It comes back to that, but it's not going to be as quick as what I do with clients one-to-one, and it's not as direct, basically, but still good stuff. So you can be encouraging and kind in your internal dialogue, even if it's not your day or you've not done something unique. It's not a good idea. Some people kind of call themselves like, oh, stupid, as a motivational tactic. And that, because it does work, but it works in the short term, and long term it does feed that cycle that we looked at before. Doing nothing. This is actually a really important one. So doing nothing is not about achieving. So it is a fantastic down regulating tactic and something you can do like meditating. But with
That's right.
meditating, like I mentioned before, you can almost get kind of competitive about it. Whereas with doing nothing, you can't. You can't, there's nothing there to achieve. So pick a time of day, put your phone in another room and sit there and tell, if you live with people, tell them you don't want to be disturbed for 10 minutes works, 20 minutes is great. And when I say do nothing, I mean no cup of tea, no podcast, literally sit there and do nothing. People will find it quite hard
I
if you
bet,
are a
yeah.
perfectionist. Yeah. And if you do kind of tend to value work and action and achievement, it's quite hard to find 20 minutes to literally do nothing, but it will calm you down like nothing else. And yeah, it's a great way to hack the system for perfectionists, because as I say, you can't achieve it particularly well. You just really have to
You
do
can't do
nothing.
it any better.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, so another one is that when you set a goal, always consider how to build joy and playfulness and fun into it. Otherwise, goals just become ways to apply more pressure. So we do want to have goals in our careers. We absolutely want to keep moving forwards. But instead of using language like I will always do this or I will never do that, use the language of I will try. Because always and never, you're setting yourself up for failure.
It's that
New,
allowance, isn't it?
sorry?
It's like that allowance that
Yeah,
you might not always be perfect, that it won't be 100%, but you will endeavor.
yeah. And that, try doing something at like 60 or 70% is better than zero.
Yeah,
And for your mental health, sometimes better than 100 as well.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And often plenty good enough for
yeah,
what you're trying to achieve.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, New rules I've put here. So this is the idea of coming up with new rules for yourself, like new boundaries. What are you taking on versus what can you say no to? How often are you going to check work emails on holiday and things like this? And actually sit down and have some rules for yourself, because this is a healthy way to get control. This is, boundaries are a great thing, and it can pay dividends to kind of sit down and set those out in advance, as opposed to trying to get control through being perfect. And if you read these for 15 minutes every morning, guess what? They get programmed in, because they're very suggestible in the mornings.
Okay.
Exposure response, when you do have a mistake or an imperfection. So when you make a mistake, which will happen, consciously try to feel a different way about it. Like consciously talk to yourself and make new associations. It might sound a bit silly at the start, but just break the pattern basically, and um, say, oh yes, that was a mistake, but actually, look, the world hasn't ended. Um, Roger Federer lost 46% of all the points he ever played. So there's going to be a lot of failing and a lot of opportunities for exposure response on the way to success.
Yeah.
Russ Harris, he has a list of values that you can literally find on Google. And one way to think about values is that they're the opposite of living for achievement, because it's, to sound cheesy, it's more about the journey than the destination, right? It's how you want to live your life on the way to achieving your goals. If you're very, very focused on your end goal, you'll miss the day-to-day. And these values can actually help you set out how you want to live the day-to-day. So it's a different way of thinking about things, like focus more on the values than the end achievement. And I do believe that if you do that, you will still get the end achievement. You'll just feel a bit better about it along the way.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, a cost benefit analysis is a great thing to do. This is what it says on the tin. So look at the costs of holding on to this coping mechanism versus the benefits of letting go. And that can, your brain always wants to move away from pain and towards pleasure. So it can help get your subconscious mind on board. We mentioned avoiding and procrastinating. If you're in that state, it's really important that you do start the day and start the task. So you show up for work and you do start, and your inbox might be overwhelming, but you do log on and look at it, and then you just work incrementally. So there's been studies done to show that the first 5 minutes of any task is the hardest, because starting is literally the hardest. So if you can get through 5 minutes, there's then been another study done that shows 12 is kind of a magic number. If you can do 12 minutes, you can kind of make a disproportionate amount of headway. And then half an hour as well is a great one. So when you get to, like, let's say the half-hour mark, check in with how you're feeling. Do you need to, at this point, set a boundary and say, it's time for me to go home, or, I need a break? If so, accept that with no guilt. Okay, it's really important. This is what keeps us actually there for the long term. So, this is what makes sure that we do have another day in us where we will feel motivated, as opposed to going into that cycle of avoiding. Sheryl Sandberg at the bottom there is the COO of Facebook, Meta, and this is her motto: better done than perfect. And the final point here that can be used is this double checking versus endless checking. So it's really important to double check work, but I think we can all kind of relate to, or maybe have the experience ourselves, of somebody who never lets go of a piece of work because they're endlessly checking it. Up to and including people, and I've done this, and I know other people have, who spend ages on an email and then go back into their sent items to read the email that they just sent, to kind of check it again.
Yeah. When it's
So
done and it should be let go.
exactly, there you go. It's like, trust
Yeah.
yourself and know when to stop.
Yeah.
The Pareto principle is that 80% of your result comes from 20% of your work. So after 20%, you're actually into diminishing returns. It won't make that much difference to your end result, but it can be the difference between staying motivated and burning out and, wanting to leave your job entirely. Okay, some further resources. Elizabeth Day has got this really good podcast called How to Fail. She's had guests on there from Katie Price through to Malala and Monica Lewinsky. Those were 3 really good episodes. So I'd recommend that. Daniel Milo wrote this really nice book. So he takes examples from nature to critique Darwin's idea of survival of the fittest. And he points out that many more animals than just the fittest survive, including all those that are just good enough. They survive, they multiply, and the world is full of them, and kind of a beautiful place for that. It's not just the fittest. And he does get quite philosophical. So he talks about how we've, as society, we've really subscribed to this idea from Darwin for the last 150, 200 years. And at the same time, that correlates with the Industrial Revolution and a huge focus on productivity and efficiency and making money and achievement. And he really goes into, is that a coincidence, or is that, that society kind of really latched onto Darwin's theory because it correlated nicely with the prevailing opinion
Mm.
at the time. So
It
that's quite a
feels
nice work.
feels as well. It's like you said as well, and it is cheesy, but it is true. It is about that, the destination or the journey. It's
Mm.
the same thing, isn't it? It's the survival of the fittest is like one ultimate survivor sort of thing, rather than just all getting along and all just being happy and
Yeah,
that kind of thing existing rather than sort of like hitting the end point. And I
yeah.
talk to people about this a lot in their careers, obviously, because there's so many points that feel like qualification feels like such a massive
Mhm.
end point if you're not careful, which is, of course, it's the start point. And every promotion and every step, is such a can feel like the thing, but actually just if you're not enjoying the journey, if you're not living the day to day in a state of contentment, then
Yeah,
you're hitting points for no real reason other than to just say you've hit them. And it's but being in the day to day much more important than just getting to the end of it, which I think is that's it's quite a cultural thing as well, isn't it? I think, be
yeah,
it in a society or within a law firm, there's a lot to be said around how culture then dictates that.
yeah. Absolutely no, like couldn't agree more, to be honest. It's like so true. And as well, when you do then hit that, let's say that qualifying, you really do see that as an endpoint. When you hit that as well, it's going to feel like a bit of a disappointment because it's
Yeah,
not the endpoint. You've still got more to go. There's still,
exactly.
if you're in that mindset of wanting to always do more, you're never going to really hit an endpoint.
Mm,
So it
mm,
can be really demoralizing to think
yeah,
in that way. Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Okay, so in fact, just a bit about me. So I was a full-time employment lawyer until July. I am now a certified career coach and affiliated with the ABP, which is the Association for Business Psychology. Um, if you if you have watched this and you have got you've enjoyed learning a little bit, please do sign up to my newsletter, stay connected, or reach out for a free consultation. There's a form on my website, or you can just email me or message me on LinkedIn. Just kind of briefly, the way that I work is I would have two sessions with a client to start with. They can be booked online. They're £100 each. And I'm really in that time getting to know you, getting to know the root of the problem so that I can then make a very tailored set length program for you. So that would be up to 3 months, somewhere between 3 weeks and 3 months long, with an hour each week. Um, we were talking, I think, before the recording about AI and the role of that. And I do
Yep.
use AI in the first two sessions so that it can pick up exactly what clients are saying, their exact words, as well as their ums and ahs. And then I can be looking at tone of voice and body language and pulling out um, all the limiting beliefs that a client may have and exactly how I can help them, which may be related to perfectionism, or it could be any other career challenge. I would say that the overall thing I'm trying to do is help junior lawyers um, have more stress-free time with their loved ones, so friends, family, partners. So we don't really want career problems to encroach out into the rest of
Mm.
our lives. I think keep it in perspective.
Absolutely. And it's so important as well. If you're at the beginning of your career, you want a long and sustainable career. And so it's the sustainability of it that's important, that you can
Yeah,
actually continue it, that you're not just sort of shooting out of a cannon, going to crash at some point, that you're able to maintain. that you've got everything in place, the systems and the mindset and everything in place for to do this for the long term, not for it to be a single goal and you've hit it and now you've got to fall because you couldn't possibly continue at that pace, you know.
Yeah.
It's I think it's so important in a legal career to make sure you're on the right path from the beginning.
Yeah.
So
And I think, I'd be interested to know what you think about whether law firms are cottoning on to the fact that you do need to pace yourself, you do need to take breaks and perhaps not record every minute of your day because for the long run, it's going to keep you far more motivated.
I think there's more and more recognition around that now, and I
Mm,
think there's, I mean, there's lots of like the research that law care does and this kind of thing, is really important to highlight it as an issue. And I think there is, a greater acceptance that something needs to be done about it, or that this is an issue within the profession. So I think, yeah, it's all in
mm,
the right direction as to, you know, not every firm is perfect, but they're not going to be because we know this. But lots increasingly, I see firms who are doing the right things with the in the right direction, with their sort of with their heart in the right place, shall we say?
mm.
That they are looking to help people from a genuine place, and I think that can only be a good thing. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, cool. Well, that is the end of my
fabulous.
presentation. Thank you
Well,
very much.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming online. I think I've definitely learned something, and I've got lots of people to look up as well, lots of resources to look up. So
Yeah.
that's going to be my task to go away and do that because I think it's always just good to see things from another perspective and say there's a lot of resources out there, and you can go into overload actually trying to
Mm.
improve and be the best version of yourself and all this sort of thing. So it's nice to sort of have some guidance and some things to watch, but not go into overload.
Yeah, I think it's important to find like the one, two, maybe three people or places that you really click with, and then just trust them and kind of don't get thrown
Sure.
off by everything that pops up on Instagram promising you like a better life. So
Yes, yeah, well, and
yeah, find
there's a
what
whole can of worms right there, isn't there? So,
exactly, yeah. Yeah, just find
fabulous,
what works.
brilliant. Well, say thank you so much for coming online and having this conversation, and thank you for everyone that's watching it either later or on the day. But it was great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.